Hello, I'm Doris. Imagine this. I was told, you're not invited to my own daughter's wedding. But what they didn't know was that behind that cruel rejection, I uncovered a web of lies and deceit. A betrayal that went far beyond a simple invitation. My family's secrets? They didn't just hurt me, they tried to rob me of everything. But they underestimated me. The truth? It's coming out, and it's worse than anyone ever imagined. Stick around to find out how this all ends. I stood there at the edge of the wedding venue, the hum of chatter and laughter filling the air. But none of it reached me. It was a strange sensation, like standing in the middle of a room filled with people, but being completely invisible. It was my daughter's wedding day, the moment I had been waiting for, hoping for. Finally, after all these years, I thought I would be acknowledged. Finally, I thought my family would see me. Really see me for all the years I had sacrificed. I've spent my life working tirelessly. I worked long hours, missed birthdays, missed anniversaries, missed moments with my children, all so they could have more. More than I had as a kid. More than I ever dreamed of having. But somehow, all that hard work, the sweat, the sacrifice, the nights I came home late, and the Sundays I worked instead of being with my family, it all seemed to mean nothing now. I walked into the hall, my heart racing with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. It was a perfect California afternoon, the sun casting a warm glow over the ceremony. The golden light streamed through the windows, illuminating the white flowers and elegant decorations. It should have been a moment to bask in pride, to see my daughter walking down the aisle, her face glowing with happiness, but instead, I felt a tight knot in my stomach. I was almost there when I heard it, the voice of my niece, distant and cold. "Uncle, you're not invited!" The words hit me like a slap across the face, so sudden and so sharp that I stood frozen. It didn't make sense. I had helped, I had supported, I had given everything to this family. I even helped fund some of the wedding. And yet, here I was, not invited to the most important event in my own daughter's life. I blinked, trying to process what was happening. But the room around me seemed to close in. My breath hitched, my heart thudded in my chest. I turned slowly, but it felt like I was moving through molasses, each step heavier than the last. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I just stood there, numb, trying to understand what I had done to deserve this. I could see the guests, all mingling and enjoying themselves. But no one even looked my way. It was as if I wasn't even there. No one acknowledged my presence. No one cared. I had always tried to be there for them, tried to keep the peace, to hold the family together. And yet, today, on this day, the most important day of my daughter's life, I wasn't even worth a second glance. I retreated to the side, finding a quiet corner by the garden, where I could be alone with my thoughts. The pain, the confusion, it all came rushing back. How had it come to this? What had I done wrong? Hadn't I given everything for them? But now, it seemed all that mattered was my daughter's wedding, and I was nothing more than an afterthought. I remembered the countless hours I had spent at work, the weekends I sacrificed to give them a better life. I remembered how I'd put my own dreams on hold so they could chase theirs. I remembered the times I'd been told, "Don't worry, Dad, we'll take care of you." But here I was, alone, forgotten. I couldn't help but wonder, had I wasted all these years? Had I done it all for nothing? I had been a provider, a protector, but none of that seemed to matter now. No one cared about the sacrifices I made. No one cared about the love I gave. And most painful of all, my daughter, the one I had always hoped would appreciate me, had turned her back on me. I walked back toward the venue, trying to shake off the numbness. I needed answers. I needed to confront her, to ask her why. But what would I say? What could I say to someone who had already decided I wasn't important enough to even be part of her wedding? I found her outside, standing alone by the entrance, her eyes scanning the crowd. She didn't see me at first, but I knew she felt me standing there. There was a moment of silence, the kind that felt heavy with everything that had gone unsaid for years. Then she looked at me, and the coldness in her eyes hit me harder than any words ever could. "Why?" I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper. She didn't answer at first. Then, with a shrug, she said, "It's not personal, Dad. It's just how things are." How things are? My heart sank. The words I had feared, the words I had dreaded, but had known were coming, had finally arrived. I had always tried to keep the peace, always tried to do the right thing. But here, in front of me, was the brutal truth. My daughter didn't need me anymore. I wasn't part of her life. I was just a shadow, a reminder of the man I used to be, a man who had sacrificed everything and received nothing in return. I stood there, trying to find the words to say, but there was nothing. The years of silent sacrifice, the endless hours of work, the moments I had missed, all of it had led to this moment, this painful realization, and I couldn't even argue it. I couldn't even fight back. All I could do was stand there, numb, watching as my daughter turned away and disappeared into the crowd. I wanted to scream, to shout, to fight for what I deserved, but I was too tired, too defeated, and so I walked away, back into the shadows, back to the edge of the wedding where no one would notice me. My heart ached, not just because of the rejection, but because I realized that I had spent so much of my life hoping for a love and respect that I would never receive. As I stood there, feeling more invisible than ever, a part of me wondered if I had done something wrong. Had I been too passive, too quiet? Maybe I should have fought harder. But it was too late for regrets. Too late for second chances. This was the family I had built, and I was no longer welcome in it. The weight of the betrayal settled in deeper as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the venue. It was a beautiful evening, but I couldn't see it anymore. I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was the bitter sting of rejection. And then, in the silence, I realized something. There was one thing I wasn't prepared for: the hidden truth behind the wedding. I stood outside the wedding venue, still trying to process the events that had just unfolded. The sun was setting behind the grand building, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. But none of that beauty seemed to reach me. I felt like I was standing in the shadows of my own life, watching everything that mattered to me slip further away. The shock of being excluded from my daughter's wedding still hadn't fully hit me, but it was slowly starting to sink in. I hadn't expected much from her wedding. In fact, I had convinced myself that I wouldn't be a priority, that I'd simply be there to watch from the sidelines. But I never thought I would be told I wasn't even welcome. The words "you're not invited" echoed in my mind as I stood there. The weight of rejection pressing down on me harder than I ever thought possible. I thought I'd earned a place in her life, in this celebration. I thought she would see all the years I'd spent giving her everything I had, the sacrifices I had made for her and the rest of the family. But now, all I had was a sense of betrayal and confusion. Why? Why was I being shut out after everything I had done? The pain of exclusion felt like an open wound, raw and relentless. I began to walk, my feet carrying me aimlessly. The quiet hum of the reception hall behind me felt like a distant memory. My thoughts were spiraling. I began to think back to other times when I'd been overlooked, times when I had been taken for granted, when my efforts had been dismissed with a simple thank you or worse, nothing at all. I had tried to keep it all together, to be the reliable, strong pillar for my family, but now I was left standing in the cold, wondering what I had done to deserve this. It wasn't just the wedding, not really. It was everything leading up to it. My whole life had been about providing for them, making sure they had what they needed, even at the cost of my own dreams. I had given everything, and yet, it seemed like it wasn't enough. I had to confront the ugly truth. Maybe I wasn't as important as I had always hoped. Maybe I was just a means to an end, a paycheck, a source of support, a figure to call on when it was convenient, but never someone to be truly valued or loved. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could they do this to me? How could my daughter, the one I'd sacrificed so much for, turn her back on me like this? I had to know why. I couldn't let this go without finding out the truth, even if it meant digging into places I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just sit there and accept what had happened. I needed answers. I needed to understand why my daughter had excluded me from such a monumental event. I started by reaching out to a few family members, trying to get some insight. But most of them were evasive, too scared or unwilling to say anything that would upset her. Some of them seemed genuinely uncomfortable when I asked about the wedding. Others just shrugged, offering weak excuses. I wasn't getting anywhere. But then, I overheard something that changed everything. It was a quiet conversation between my daughter and her fiancé. They didn't realize I was standing just around the corner. But I heard enough to understand what was going on. My daughter had been talking about the wedding expenses, and what caught my attention was the mention of my name. Apparently, they'd been using my financial contributions to secure deals for the wedding deals that I wasn't even aware of. I was shocked. They had been using me, taking my money, and now they were excluding me from the very event I thought I was helping to make possible. The betrayal hit me hard. I stood frozen in that moment, listening to the words that seemed to confirm all my worst fears. They hadn't just excluded me from the wedding, they had been using me for years. And it wasn't just my money. It was my time, my energy, and my emotional investment. All of it had been taken for granted. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. My daughter had been manipulating me. She had always kept me in the dark about her true feelings, about what she really needed. She didn't see me as a father, as someone worthy of respect and love. No, I was a tool, a means to an end. And now, with the wedding in full swing, she didn't even have the decency to invite me, to acknowledge my role in her life. I could feel the anger boiling inside me. It wasn't just disappointment. It was rage. I had been taken advantage of, and I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was about years of feeling invisible, years of being taken for granted. It was time to do something about it. I walked away from the conversation, my mind racing. I had to confront her. I had to know why she had done this, why she had chosen to hurt me like this. I couldn't let it go. I needed closure. I needed to understand. The next day, I found myself standing at her doorstep, the familiar feeling of dread creeping up my spine. I had rehearsed what I was going to say, but when the door opened, all the words seemed to escape me. Instead, I simply asked, "Why?" She didn't even blink. Her eyes were cold, distant, and she didn't even try to offer an explanation. "It's complicated," she said, her voice clipped. "You're just too involved in everything, Dad. You always try to take credit for everything I do." Her words felt like a slap across the face. All these years, I had sacrificed so much, but she didn't see it. She didn't care. It was all about her now, and I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I stood there, speechless, my heart heavy with the realization that my daughter had never truly appreciated me. "Is that it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is that how you see me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she just looked at me with a blank expression, like she had already made her decision about me. The door closed in my face without another word. I walked away, but my heart was shattering. I had hoped for a reconciliation, a moment where I could finally feel like I mattered. But now, I realized that hope was nothing more than a distant memory. My daughter had made her choice, and it wasn't me. As I stood there, the weight of everything crashing down on me, I realized something. There was one thing I hadn't expected: the truth, once exposed, would shake my family to its core. I sat in my living room, the same worn armchair I'd sat in for years, staring at the scattered papers before me. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. The air felt thick, thick with the realization that something had gone terribly wrong. My hands shook as I picked up the letters, photographs, and old bank statements. Each piece of paper was a reminder, a piece of the puzzle I had never really questioned. But now, after everything that had happened, they seemed different. I grabbed an old family photo, one from a summer gathering a few years ago. My daughter, laughing, her arms around me as if I mattered. She had thanked me for my help with the wedding, or so I thought. But now, looking at the same photograph, I remembered how that thank you had been nothing but a ploy. She needed money, a loan, something I had no idea about at the time. I had been a means to an end, but she had made me feel like I was part of something important. How could I have been so blind? Rereading the letter she'd written me that year, I was struck by how empty it seemed now. Her words were vague, full of gratitude but devoid of substance, and nowhere in the letter did she mention any plans for a wedding. The silence between the lines felt deafening now. I had been so willing to believe that I mattered to her, but all these years I had been nothing more than an ATM. I leaned back in the chair, my head heavy with the weight of it all. My daughter had never truly been honest with me, had never once come to me for advice or for help out of love. It had always been about the money. I had sacrificed so much, but what had it really meant? Nothing, nothing at all. That's when my phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the silence. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. My niece's voice came through the line, shaking and tense. She told me she hadn't been invited to the wedding either, which was news to me. But what she said next stopped me cold. "There was a group chat, Uncle, a chat about the wedding, and they left you out," she said, her voice bitter. "They were mocking you, saying you were too old-fashioned, that you were not worth the trouble." I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. They had made sure I wasn't part of anything. And worse, they had been talking about me behind my back, casting me aside like I didn't matter. The realization hit me harder than anything else. They had erased me. My voice caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Humiliation twisted inside me. I had been humiliated in my own family, and I hadn't even known it. I felt the heat of anger rise in my chest. How could they treat me like this? I had given them everything, and this was how I was repaid? "Don't worry, Doris," my niece added quickly. I'm on your side. But I had to let you know. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, feeling utterly hollow. But a new emotion began to take shape. It wasn't just anger, it was resolve. I was done being ignored. Done being the punching bag. I was going to find out what had really been going on, and I was going to confront it head on. After hanging up, I sat back, staring at the papers scattered around me. There was a cold clarity now. I had been a fool to believe in their love, to think that I had a place in their lives. I needed more answers. I needed the truth. My first thought was to call my son. He wasn't involved in the wedding, and he hadn't been part of the group chat. Maybe he was the neutral ground I needed. But when I called, the voicemail picked up, and my voice cracked when I left the message. Son, it's me. I need to talk. It's important. I didn't expect much, but I had hoped for something. A word of reassurance. A small bridge back to the family I thought I still had. But hours passed, and finally, I received a text from him. I think it's best you give them space right now. I read the message again, the words sinking in. He had turned his back too. A wave of despair washed over me. But it wasn't just the rejection. It was the feeling of being so utterly misunderstood. I wasn't asking for much, just a little respect, but it seemed like I wasn't even worth that. My own son, my flesh and blood, had sided with them. I was alone. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth as I picked up an old family album from the shelf. It had been years since I had looked through it, and I thought maybe a walk down memory lane would clear my head. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. In recent photos, I wasn't in them. No longer part of the family milestones. And then I saw it. A picture from last year, my daughter, smiling proudly, with a gift I'd given her. It was a watch. She had worn it on her wrist, but never once had she acknowledged it. The watch I had bought for her was like an afterthought in the photo. The gift was there, but I wasn't. The weight of it all began to settle in. Presents didn't guarantee appreciation. I could have been anyone, and they still would have ignored me. The past few years of my life had been a series of quiet sacrifices, and now I saw it for what it was, nothing more than a role I had played, one that I had been dismissed from when it was no longer needed. I closed the album and set it down, my hands trembling. But there was a fire burning in me now. I couldn't just sit here and let this happen. I couldn't let them get away with this. I had to act. I had to take control. I walked to my desk and started pulling out financial records, everything I had done to help with the wedding. The bills, the emails, the agreements I had unknowingly signed. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew there was something there, something I could use. I needed advice, so I called a lawyer, friend of mine. Not to sue, but to figure out what leverage I might have. I wasn't going to sit around and let them walk all over me anymore. The conversation with the lawyer was brief, but it gave me something I hadn't had in days: clarity. As I hung up the phone, a new determination surged through me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control again. I wasn't going to let this go. I was going to expose them for what they really were: manipulative, selfish, and ungrateful. But the truth wasn't over yet. I hadn't seen the full picture. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. When I opened it, I found an envelope sitting on the doorstep. No return address, no name. I opened it quickly, and inside was a printed copy of a text thread. My daughter and her fiancé were mocking me, discussing how they'd kept me out of the wedding. They'd even promised each other that I wouldn't find out. You said he wouldn't find out. You promised, the text read. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was all coming together now, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I sat in my old recliner, watching the sun dip below the horizon outside my window. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink hues, the kind of sunset that always made me feel like there was something still good in the world. But tonight, as the day faded into night, there was nothing comforting about it. The warmth of the sunlight did nothing to soothe the coldness in my chest. My mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, each moment more painful than the last. The phone call with my niece, the texts I uncovered, the letter from my daughter, each piece of information was like another crack in the foundation of my family. I had thought that I was doing the right thing, that my sacrifices had meant something. But now, everything I had done felt hollow. The pain of being excluded, of being manipulated for my money, was eating at me, and I didn't know how to make it stop. I reached over to the coffee table and picked up the letter from my daughter. It had arrived that morning, a neatly folded envelope with my name typed in bold letters. The contents were chilling. Dear Dad, we'd like to invite you to a family meeting to discuss the upcoming wedding. It's important that we talk about some things before the event. Please come prepared to listen. Sincerely, your daughter. At first, I couldn't believe it. A family meeting? The words on the page seemed to mock me. It wasn't an invitation. It was an ultimatum. She was telling me what to do, not asking for a conversation. There was no warmth, no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. It was just another attempt to control the narrative, to make it seem like they were doing me a favor by letting me be a part of the wedding after all. I tossed the letter back on the table. The bitterness in my mouth was unbearable. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this meeting wasn't about reconciliation, it was about making me feel small, about putting me in my place. The anger inside me started to bubble up again, but it wasn't just anger. It was a growing sense of determination. I couldn't sit back and let this go. I had to confront them. I had to expose the lies and manipulations that had been hidden behind their polite smiles for so long. But even as the resolve began to form, there was a nagging fear inside me. A fear that if I confronted them, if I pushed too hard, I might lose them all for good. I had spent my entire life trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy. I had sacrificed my own happiness to be the good father, the good provider, the one who never rocked the boat. And now, here I was, about to shatter everything. I closed my eyes and thought back to a time when I was more than just the silent figure in the background. A time when I stood up for myself, when I had a voice and the courage to use it. I remembered how I used to fight for what I believed in, how I used to challenge the status quo. But over the years, I had learned to let things go, to bury my own desires for the sake of peace. I thought it was what family was supposed to be, about sacrifice, compromise, understanding. But all of that had led me here, to this moment of complete betrayal. What if this was the last chance I had to stand up for myself? What if, in the end, everything I had worked for, my family, my reputation, was nothing more than an illusion? I didn't know the answer, but I couldn't let this go any longer. I needed to act, to take control. I grabbed my phone and dialed Bill's number. Bill had been my friend for decades, a retired lawyer who knew the ins and outs of legal matters. If anyone could help me figure out what to do, it was him. Bill, it's Doris, I said when he answered. I need your help. I'm in a bit of a situation with my daughter and her wedding. It's complicated. Bill was quiet for a moment before he spoke, his voice calm and reassuring. Doris, I've known you a long time. If you're calling me, it must be serious. What's going on? I told him everything about the exclusion from the wedding, the text messages, the letter. I told him how I felt manipulated, used, and abandoned by the very people I had spent my life supporting. That's tough, Doris, Bill said after I finished. But you've got to remember one thing. Family can be a hell of a thing. Sometimes, people don't appreciate what you've done for them until it's too late. But that doesn't mean you should keep sacrificing yourself for them. I let his words sink in. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone understood. Someone who'd been through similar struggles. Bill continued. You need to stop being the peacekeeper. You've been too quiet for too long. You've given them everything, your time, your money, your life. Now, it's time to take control. You need to stand up for yourself. Set some boundaries. And if that means fighting for your respect, then fight. His words hit home. I hadn't thought of it that way before. I had been so afraid of upsetting everyone that I'd let them walk all over me. But I wasn't the man I used to be. I couldn't let this go. Not anymore. I've got some things to gather, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. I've got records, documents, emails. I need to confront them. I'm going to expose the truth. Bill's voice softened. You've got this, Doris. Just remember, don't back down. They're the ones who've wronged you, not the other way around. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and I could finally breathe. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a plan. I wasn't just going to sit back and take it anymore. I was going to expose the lies and manipulations. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering everything I could find, documents, emails, texts. I had proof of my involvement in the wedding. I had proof that I had been used, taken advantage of, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. As I sifted through the papers, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was an email from my daughter to her fiancé, dated just a few weeks ago. She promised him that she would take care of him financially. But not once did she mention my contributions. It was all there in black and white. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of anger course through me. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. But it also gave me the strength I needed. I had the evidence. I was ready. The next day, I arrived at the meeting. I wore my best suit, the one I'd saved for special occasions. I had to look the part, strong, composed, like I wasn't about to walk into a lion's den. But when I walked into the room, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. There, sitting at the table with my daughter and her fiancé, was my ex-wife. I hadn't seen her in years. She had been absent from my life, and yet here she was, sitting across from me, her cold gaze meeting mine. My heart sank. This wasn't just a family meeting. This was going to be a battle. And it wasn't just about me and my daughter anymore. The tension in the room thickened as I took my seat. My daughter smiled politely, but I could see the hostility in her eyes. She wasn't here to make things right. She was here to finish what she had started. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly, but I kept my composure. I was ready for this. I had to be. I took a deep breath and finally spoke. Why did you exclude me? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. My daughter's face tightened. She didn't answer immediately. Her fiancé jumped in, trying to defend her actions, claiming they didn't want to burden me. I wasn't buying it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the documents I had gathered. I laid them on the table, one by one, exposing the truth. The room went silent as they realized I knew everything. "I'm done being the fool," I said, my voice low but firm. "If I have to expose everything, I will." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a call from my lawyer. I answered quickly, and the conversation was short. My lawyer told me there was a chance for legal action. I could feel the weight of his words settle in my gut. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "I'll do whatever it takes to get the truth out," I said, my voice steady with determination. The silence in my house was suffocating. It had been days since the confrontation, and the weight of it all still hung in the air like a heavy fog. I sat there, in my old recliner, staring out the window at the empty street. The world outside seemed normal, unaffected by the storm that had torn through my family. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. But all I could feel was cold. Cold in my heart, cold in my soul. The betrayal of my daughter, the manipulations I had uncovered, everything was still too fresh, too painful. I couldn't shake it. I didn't know what to do with all this anger and hurt, but I knew I had to do something. The phone rang, and my heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, but the number on the screen made my stomach tighten. It was him, the fiancé. I answered, my voice sharp. "What do you want?" He hesitated on the other end. Then his voice came through, nervous, almost pleading. "Doris, I think we need to talk. I've come to your place. I want to explain." I didn't know what to expect from him, but I wasn't about to let him manipulate me again. Still, I agreed to meet him, if only to hear what kind of excuse he had cooked up this time. He said he wanted to make peace, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else going on. When he arrived, I barely recognized him. He wasn't the confident man I'd seen at the wedding. This time, he was nervous, almost shaking. He sat across from me, the tension between us so thick I could almost taste it. "I never meant for things to get this bad," he said, his voice quiet, trying to sound sincere. "I didn't know how deep this had gone. I didn't want you to feel excluded. It's not what I wanted." I leaned back in my chair, staring at him, trying to read between the lines. Something about his words didn't sit right with me. There was a charm to his tone, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt rehearsed. Like he was trying to manipulate me, get me to soften. He continued, almost pleading now. "You've been like a father to me. I want us to work together, to be a family. This whole thing, the wedding, it's all just a misunderstanding." I couldn't believe it. He had the audacity to sit there and call himself a father figure. He wanted to play the victim, spin a story where he was the good guy who had been dragged into this mess. But as he spoke, something in his story didn't add up. And then I caught it. A slip, a detail he mentioned, something his fiancée had said in the meeting that contradicted everything he was telling me. I wasn't going to call him out on it right away. I knew I had to play this carefully, but I felt my blood boil. I wasn't going to let him get away with this lie. "Listen," I said, cutting him off. "I'm not here to make excuses. I've heard enough. You're not fooling me." His face shifted, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, but he quickly masked it, trying to return to his charm. "Doris, I just want things to go back to normal. We're family, right?" "Family?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You've used me. You've manipulated me for your own gain, and now you're trying to make me feel guilty for seeing it." He shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence now slipping away. "I'm sorry you feel that way, really. I just want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. If you didn't want to hurt me, you wouldn't have kept me in the dark. You wouldn't have used me for your wedding, and you sure as hell wouldn't have excluded me. He didn't answer, and I could see the walls going up around him. He wasn't sorry. He was just trying to cover his tracks, trying to spin a story that would absolve him of any responsibility. The silence in the room grew heavy, and for a moment, I just sat there, letting the weight of his lies sink in. Finally, he stood, sensing the conversation was over. I hope you'll think about what I said, he mumbled before walking toward the door. I didn't answer. I just watched him leave, knowing that nothing he said would change how I felt. It was all too late. I sank back into my chair, the anger still simmering inside me. But now there was something else, something deeper, a feeling of betrayal that ran so much deeper than anything I had anticipated. It was like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I was left with nothing but a gaping hole where my trust had once been. I stared out the window, letting the quiet wash over me. But it wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw my daughter's name. My heart sank. I picked up the phone, already knowing what was coming. "Dad!" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. "You're a disappointment to me. You're too hard on me. I don't need your judgment. I don't need your control. I've done everything I can to make you proud, and this is what I get?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Her words, sharp and cruel, echoed in my ears. I was no longer a father to her. I was a burden. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was blaming me for everything. I hung up the phone without saying a word. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to fix this. Everything was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I sat there, staring at the empty space around me, wondering where it all went wrong. How had I failed them? Or had they failed me? I couldn't answer. I didn't know. I only knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep letting them manipulate me, couldn't keep letting them destroy what little I had left. I had to take action. Later that day, I went to the local cafe to clear my head. That's when I ran into Samuel. He was an old colleague of mine, a retired judge who knew a lot about family dynamics. He'd witnessed the struggles I'd gone through with my family over the years, but we hadn't spoken much in recent times. He noticed me as soon as I walked in. "Doris, it's been a while," he said, his voice warm but filled with knowing. We sat down, and I told him what had been happening, the betrayal, the manipulation, the family I once knew now lost to me. Samuel listened patiently, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, he took a deep breath. "You're not the first one, Doris," he said, his voice low. "Family can be a hell of a thing. I've been through similar with my own. But listen, you've got to take control now. You can't keep letting them walk all over you." He paused, then added, "I've heard things from your ex-wife. Things about your daughter's fiancé. He's been playing a game, looking out for his interests, not yours." I felt a chill run through me. I knew there was more going on. I just didn't know how deep it went. Samuel continued. "You might want to consider a legal route if this keeps escalating. But be careful. Family is tricky, Doris. It's not just about the truth. It's about the fallout." I felt torn. I didn't want to destroy what was left of my family, but I couldn't let this manipulation go on. I had to choose, and I didn't know which path would destroy me more. After the conversation, I felt a little lighter, but also more uncertain than ever. I had a lot to think about. As I prepared for the final confrontation, I gathered all the documents and messages I had. I was ready. This time, I wouldn't back down. The next call I received was from my lawyer. He confirmed what I already knew. I had legal grounds to act. The confidence I'd been lacking suddenly surged inside me. I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. The final showdown was coming, and I was ready to fight. I sat alone in the living room, the familiar weight of the legal documents before me, but it felt like nothing could prepare me for the storm that was about to come. Days of reflection, of replaying the hurt and betrayal, had brought me to this moment. I had the truth, the evidence, and the strength to stand up for myself. The quiet in my house felt suffocating, like it was all waiting for the inevitable. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. The number on the screen wasn't a surprise, I'd been expecting it. My daughter's fiancé was finally going to face me. I dialed the number with a sense of finality, knowing that this would be the last time I'd let them manipulate me. Hello? His voice was shaky, hesitant. It was clear he wasn't expecting me to call him out like this. "We need to talk," I said. My voice cold. "Tomorrow, be at my place. It's time we settle this once and for all." I could hear the nervousness in his voice as he agreed. There was no room left for his lies. No chance for more manipulation. I wasn't going to let him off easy. The next day, the moment I opened the door, I knew he was here. Not to make amends, but to try to control the narrative. He was too composed, too ready to charm. But his eyes betrayed him. There was fear in them. It was the fear of being caught. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us aware of the tension in the room. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock in the corner. I broke the silence. "I know everything," I said, the words hanging in the air like smoke. "I know about the lies, the manipulation, the texts, the photos, and everything you've tried to keep hidden. It's all laid out in front of me." His face went pale, and he stammered, trying to speak, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. He was caught. He was cornered, and he knew it. I leaned forward, placing the documents on the table between us. "Here it is," I continued, my voice steady. "The evidence, the truth. You can't hide from it anymore." I slid a few pages towards him, texts, emails, photos, proof of the manipulation, the lies, and the schemes they'd orchestrated behind my back. His eyes darted to them, then back to me, but he couldn't deny what was in front of him. The fiancé opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Don't even try to spin this," I said, cutting him off. "I'm done listening to your excuses." His discomfort was palpable, but instead of backing down, he shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Doris, I never meant for you to feel excluded." I interrupted again, my voice growing colder. "Don't lie to me. I'm done with your games. You've manipulated her for years. You've used her. And now you think you can just waltz in or here and fix it with a few words?" I could see the realization hitting him. He didn't have the power anymore. I did. But before I could continue, my daughter walked into the room. Her face went ashen when she saw the documents on the table, and she froze in the doorway. She tried to mask her surprise, but it was too late. I had her now. "Why did you exclude me?" I asked her directly. I wasn't playing games anymore. The truth had to come out. Her breath caught in her throat. "Dad, it's not like that," she said quickly, the tone defensive. "It's all been a misunderstanding. I didn't want to hurt you." I stared at her, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. You and your fiancé have been planning this behind my back for months. I've been nothing but a tool for your convenience, and now you want to act like nothing happened? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she started to sob. She begged me to forgive her, to understand that things hadn't been what I thought. The emotional manipulation was undeniable now. I had been her emotional punching bag for years, but not anymore. No, I said firmly, standing up from my chair. I'm done letting you manipulate me. You can't keep using me like this. I gave you everything I had, and this is how you repay me? I turned to face the fiancé, who had been sitting in silence, watching the emotional exchange unfold. It was his turn now. He couldn't hide behind her anymore. You, I said, pointing directly at him. You've been pulling the strings all along. You've been controlling her, using her for your own gain. Why? What did you want from her? Money? Power? He stammered. But I didn't let him off the hook. Tell me the truth. Why have you been so eager to drive a wedge between me and my daughter? What's your real agenda here? The fiancé swallowed hard, his face flushed. I didn't want this to happen. I just wanted to protect her, he said, his voice trembling. Protect her? I scoffed. You've been controlling her every move. You've been using her to get what you want, and now you want me to believe this is about protection? He cracked. The mask he'd been wearing shattered in that moment. It's not about protection, Doris. It's about control. She's the key to everything I want, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it. The room went silent. The words hung in the air like poison, each one sinking deeper into my chest. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It was about a man manipulating my daughter for his own selfish ambitions. I turned back to my daughter, the weight of the truth settling on my shoulders. You don't see it, do you? He doesn't care about you. He never has. It's all been a game to him. Her face twisted in pain, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was right there, and she knew it. I took a deep breath and sat down again, the weight of the moment heavy on my shoulders. The room felt colder, the air thicker with tension. I had all the power now, but it didn't feel good. It just felt like the end of something I couldn't save. I'll give you one last chance, I said, my voice steady but firm. Make things right. Admit the harm you've caused, and maybe, just maybe, I'll forgive you. But if not, I'm done. I'll walk away from this, and I won't look back. There was a long silence, and my daughter's eyes welled up with tears. She hesitated, her face torn. I knew that whatever she decided, things would never be the same again. You want me to forgive you? I asked, standing up one last time. Fine, but you'll have to hear the truth first. I sat in my study, the weight of the legal documents in front of me heavier than it had ever been. The truth was finally within my grasp, and I was done being the passive observer. There would be no more hiding from what had been done to me. No more allowing myself to be manipulated by their lies. This time, I was going to make sure that they could no longer twist the truth to their advantage. I'd gathered everything: texts, emails, photos, financial records, every piece of evidence that would expose the truth. My hands shook slightly as I shuffled through them, but my mind was clear. This was the end. The final confrontation was coming. I had prepared myself, and now there would be no turning back. My heart raced as I dialed the number I had dreaded calling for so long. I was calling them both the daughter I had raised and the man who'd come into our lives and turned it upside down. Tomorrow. I'm meeting you both at the cafe, I said as soon as the phone rang. And this time, no more excuses. We settle everything, once and for all. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but he agreed. They had no choice. I was in control now. The next day, the cafe was eerily quiet as I arrived early, choosing a booth far in the back where I could see everything. It was strategic. There would be no distractions, no surprises. When they showed up, the tension in the air was palpable. My daughter was nervously twisting her ring, and her fiancé looked like he was about to crumble under the pressure. I didn't waste time. I leaned forward, fixing them both with a steady gaze. "I know everything," I said, my voice calm, but my words sliced through the silence. "The lies, the manipulation, the selfishness. You've both been playing games with me, and it stops now." I reached into my bag and pulled out the pile of documents. I placed them on the table between us, watching as their eyes flickered to them, then back to me. I could see the panic in their faces. There was no denying it now. "I've got texts, photos, emails, everything you've done to hide the truth from me. It's all right here." My daughter's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her fiancé shifted in his seat, trying to hide his discomfort. But it was clear he wasn't prepared for what was coming. "Enough," I said, cutting him off before he could say another word. "You've both tried to manipulate me for too long, but now it's my turn." The fiancé's attempt to defend himself was weak. He stammered, his words barely making sense as he tried to twist the story in his favor. But I wasn't fooled. I pulled out the next piece of evidence, a recording of a conversation between him and my daughter, discussing how they planned to keep me in the dark while using me for financial gain. His face went ashen. "That's fake," he said, his voice shaking. "No, it's not," I shot back, slamming the recording onto the table. "You can't talk your way out of this." The fiancé's panic was clear. His hands were trembling as he reached for his glass, but it wasn't enough to mask his fear. He knew he'd been caught. I had the truth now, and there was nothing he could do to stop me. But it wasn't over yet. I turned to my daughter, who was still sitting there in disbelief, looking at the table as if the evidence might disappear if she stared long enough. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why did you let him manipulate you?" She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know he was doing that. I didn't buy it. I couldn't." "No," I said softly. "This is where you have to choose. Do you face the truth, or do you keep lying to yourself?" Her silence was deafening. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but she wasn't ready to face it. She wasn't ready to admit the truth, and that was the hardest thing of all. I took a deep breath. I had to finish this. I wasn't going to let myself be manipulated anymore. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady. "I've been your emotional punching bag for too long, and I'm done. You can keep living in your fantasy, but I won't be a part of it anymore." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the legal documents. I placed them in front of her, her fiancé, and me. The will modification, the severance agreement, the lawsuit papers. I had already taken the first steps to protect myself. There was no turning back now. "You're not going to manipulate me anymore. You've crossed a line, and I'm not going to let it go." The air in the room grew thicker as the weight of my words sank in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was at peace. I had taken control. The power was mine now, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me. I stood up, my hands steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. "The choice is yours," I said, looking directly at my daughter. "But this chapter ends today." I turned to leave, and as I walked toward the door, I heard her voice call after me. I didn't turn around. It was over. Or so I thought. The storm raged outside, but I was calm. I sat in the living room, the dim light of the storm barely illuminating the room. The evidence was all laid out in front of me, and for weeks now, I'd been preparing for this moment. It had taken years to get to this point, but I was done waiting, done being the quiet one. This was the end. The house felt hollow, much like the life I'd been living. I thought back to the early days when this place was filled with laughter, warmth, and the hopes of a family that seemed whole. Now, it was just a place of memories, all of them tainted. But I knew this meeting was the final step. The past had to be buried today. Whether it was closure or an explosion that ended everything, I wasn't sure, but I was prepared. I'd finally chosen a side. Mine. I picked up the family photo album, flipping through the pages, each picture a bitter reminder of what I had lost. The faces smiled back at me, but the warmth I once felt was gone. The sacrifices I'd made, the years of devotion to a family that never truly appreciated me, all led to this moment. I set the album down, steeling myself. They were coming, and this time, I wouldn't back down. The doorbell rang, a sharp sound that cut through the quiet. My heart didn't race. It was just a noise, a signal that they were here. They would face the consequences of their actions. I walked to the door and opened it. My daughter and her fiancé standing on the other side. They looked uneasy, like they knew something had shifted, but they still couldn't fully grasp what was coming. I stepped aside, letting them in. There was no need for pleasantries. They knew why they were here. "This is the last time we speak like this," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've done everything I could to make things right, but now it's your turn." I didn't waste any time. I moved to the table and laid out the legal documents. The texts, the emails, the photos. The truth had been exposed. There was no running from it anymore. "I've given you enough chances to come clean, but no more. It's time for you both to face the truth." The tension in the room thickened, like the air before a storm. My daughter's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. Her fiancé stood beside her, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between me and the evidence on the table. "You've been caught," I said, looking directly at them. "You've manipulated me for too long, and now you will face the consequences." The fiancé shifted nervously. "This isn't what it seems," he started, but I wasn't having it. "I know exactly what it is," I snapped, cutting him off. I had waited too long to let him spin this any longer. "You've been using my daughter to get what you want, and I'm not going to let that slide any longer," he sputtered, his words failing him as I dropped the final bomb. I reached into the folder and pulled out a recording, his confession. The recording didn't lie. The words were clear. He had plotted against me, against my daughter, and against everything I'd worked for. His face drained of color. That's not true," he stammered. But it was too late. I hit play, and the truth echoed through the room. There was nowhere left for him to hide. "You can deny it all you want," I said, "but the truth is in your own voice." His attempt to backtrack was weak, but I didn't let him off the hook. I stayed calm, unshaken. For the first time in years, I was in control. The game was over. But then my daughter spoke up. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. She was desperate to make me believe she hadn't known what was happening, that she hadn't been part of this scheme. I wasn't fooled. "Ignorance is no excuse," I replied coldly. "You were complicit, whether you knew the full extent or not." her face contorted with guilt. She tried to speak again, but the words caught in her throat. I wasn't going to let her play the victim now. I'm done being the victim of your manipulations, I said, my voice unwavering. I've sacrificed my entire life for you, and this is how you repay me? She started to cry, and my heart clenched, but I couldn't let it sway me. This was the moment where everything had to change. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would be okay. This isn't about making excuses, I said, taking a deep breath. This is about you finally facing what you've done, what you've allowed to happen. No more pretending, no more lies. She fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. But it wasn't over yet. I turned to the fiancé. You've taken everything from me. And now, I'm done, I said, my voice colder than it had ever been. I've already started the process of severing ties legally. This is done. I pulled out the legal documents, my will, the severance agreement, the lawsuit papers. Everything was in motion now. There was no going back. I'm walking away, I said, standing up. You can either move forward with integrity or continue down this path, but I'm done. I left the papers on the table. They were my final statement. I wasn't coming back. I turned and started walking towards the door, my back straight, my resolve firm. But then I heard her voice, shaky and desperate, calling after me. Dad, please don't. I didn't turn around. This was it. The chapter was closed. I stepped out into the hallway, the finality of the moment hitting me. I didn't look back. I've done my part, I whispered to myself as I walked out the door. Now it's up to you. The quiet hum of the evening settled over the house. The storm had passed, and the sky was clear, a soft glow reflecting off the still puddles in the street. I sat by the window, looking out at the familiar neighborhood, but it all felt distant now. I had spent the past few weeks sorting through the wreckage, mental, emotional, and legal. The confrontation had been brutal, but necessary. It had been a battle for my dignity, my future, and ultimately, my peace. I had made the tough decisions, and now I was ready to live with them. The weight of it all had been overwhelming at times. The years of lies, betrayal, and emotional manipulation. But now, as I looked out at the calm streets, something else settled in. The past no longer had a hold on me. It felt strange to admit, but there was a sense of freedom in it. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the heavy burden of regret. The storm inside me had passed too. I thought back to the dreams I once had for my family, how they had once felt so attainable, so real. I had given everything to them. My time, my energy, my love. But somewhere along the way, those dreams turned into illusions, the foundation of my family cracking, piece by piece. And I had stayed, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed, until it was no longer worth the fight. Now, it was over. Standing in front of the framed family picture on the wall, I felt a strange sense of finality. That photo of us all together, smiling, happy, felt like a different lifetime. The past had its place, but it was just that now. The past. I wasn't going to let it hold me anymore. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I needed to ensure the final steps were being taken to sever ties with my daughter. The legal documents were in place, but I had to be sure there were no loose ends. My heart tightened as I hung up. It felt right, but it still hurt. Then, for the first time in weeks, I made a decision that was purely for me. I was going to leave the family home. The memories, the pain, the constant reminders, it was time to move on. I packed my things, boxing up the life I once thought I'd have. As I loaded up the car, I felt a bittersweet sense of liberation. The house was empty now, and so was my heart, but in a way that felt like freedom, not loss. I was reclaiming my life. A few days later, I found myself at a cafe, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee, when a familiar face appeared. Samuel, an old friend from my younger days. We had worked together years ago, but life had pulled us in different directions. "Doris?" he asked, as if it had been only yesterday. I smiled and nodded, and we talked for a while about the past, about the things we used to do. It was a conversation that felt like stepping back in time. And yet, everything was different now. As we spoke, I couldn't help but feel a pang of longing. Samuel reminded me of the man I used to be. Before family drama consumed me. Before my heart had been torn apart by betrayal. We were so full of life back then, dreaming of a future full of promise. He didn't know the half of what I'd been through, but he reminded me that there was still a part of that man inside me. A part of me still had love to give. I moved into my new apartment, a modest place that already felt more like home than the house I'd left behind. The first night was quiet. No sounds of arguing or whispers behind closed doors. Just silence. I unpacked my belongings slowly, making the place mine. I hung up the few pictures I had left, set out the books I had saved, and arranged the furniture just the way I liked. There was no rush anymore, no need to impress anyone. A week into my new life, I started a journal. It felt good to write down my thoughts, to give shape to the emotions I had stuffed down for so long. In those pages, I found solace. I wasn't looking for redemption anymore. I was looking for peace. And the more I wrote, the more I realized that peace was something I could find for myself, without anyone else's approval. Days later, I received a letter. It was from my daughter, a tear-stained apology for the way she'd treated me. She admitted to her mistakes, her regrets, and for the first time, I felt a small spark of hope. She had finally acknowledged the truth, but even that wasn't enough. I thought about it for a while before responding. I wrote her a letter, telling her that I accepted her apology. But I also made it clear that our relationship could never go back to what it was. "I will always love you," I wrote, "but we need to move forward, for both our sakes." It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It was the final step in this process of healing. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. My life had shifted, but it wasn't over. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. I started volunteering at a local shelter, doing what I could for others. I realized that helping people made me feel whole in a way nothing else had. It brought me peace, a sense of purpose I hadn't known I'd lost. One day, while at the shelter, I met someone new. She was kind, gentle, and shared the same simple joys I had rediscovered. We struck up a conversation, and from there, a quiet friendship began to bloom. I wasn't looking for anything, but life had a way of surprising me. I sat by the window again, watching the sunset, the quiet satisfaction of the day wrapping itself up in peace. I had been through a lot. I had fought for my dignity, for my peace, and now I could finally rest. I was free. "I've done my part," I whispered to the evening sky. "Now it's up to you."